A mathematically perfected circulation shall be perpetually equivalent and fully disposable to the remaining value of existent production. By a perpetual capacity to monetize unobligated equity, and by obligatory schedules of payment, retiring principal at perceived rates of consumption or depreciation of the related property. Strict observation of this principle, therefore, shall always determine our effective representative circulation, for an object of immutable tokenization of value is otherwise impossible. B. Necessary refinancing of all existent promissory obligations under mathematically perfected economy. This is a prescription for our means of transformation, which, while some of you may tire from this, in truth, the fact that there's a solution ought to be exciting information to you, and that it's accomplished in these few words, accounting for all the seemingly infinite permutations that are possible by classification, is a very important thing for all of us to understand. Nonetheless, we're prescribing here how to accomplish these purposes. So our section B here of 7.7b is titled Necessary Refinancing of All Existent Promissory Obligations under Mathematically Perfected Economy. To repair damages as much as practical in observation of this indispensable principle, therefore, all promissory obligations shall immediately be refinanced under mathematically perfected economy, either A. reconsidering the original promissory obligation to be no more than the cost of production in current units of currency bereft of exploitation, or B. considering the principle to prevail as representative of initial obligations, whichever is the least. In other words, we're refinancing all debts to a principle which at most either reflects what you were paying against, which would be the lesser of the two, or at worst represents what it would cost to produce a house of like value in today's denominations of currency, rather than to pay for the house against its inflated costs. So this is basically a minimization of our debts according to principles that we need to honor. Counting all prior payments of interest instead toward principal, which of course, as we've said many times, resolves most of the world's debt, and of course is necessary to do because interest is unjustifiable. And so all payments that we've made should have gone toward principal, including interest, of course. Counting all prior payments of interest instead toward principal, because no justification for the present imposition of interest has existed, because all payments therefore should have been applied toward principal, because payments of principal should have been retired from circulation, and because therefore this is the extent of the damages against us. And therefore, with the balance of principal thereafter being subject to obligatory schedules of payment, retiring remaining principal, if any, according to perceived rates of consumption or depreciation of each related property. So once we revise the principle to the lesser of evils, to a just extent, in other words, we pay for it as we would if it had been originally financed under mathematically perfected economy, and being as the rates of payments under the present system are overall generally approximately 12-fold or greater than they would be under mathematically perfected economy. Instead of costing $1,000 a year, our $100,000 home with a 100-year lifespan would cost $1,000 a month, 12 times as much. So this would generally put us approximately 12 times ahead on all our payments. Instead of being in foreclosure after paying for a home for 10 years and missing a few payments, you would be 120 years ahead on your payments, or of where of the beginning was, which is 110 years ahead of where you are now, having paid for 10 years. C. Means of determinably restoring a necessary remainder of the circulation to the accounts of the people. Excuse me for hurrying here, but I'm trying to get the program finished in a reasonable amount of time, and I'm getting there. Furthermore, as the only just means of sustaining a prosperous populace in retirement is to preserve from each person's earnings so much as sustains a self-determined state of prosperity across retirement, thus the remainder of an effective circulation shall be restored proportionately by uniformly crediting the accounts of the people of at least working age so much as they may have saved during working life, less what they would have spent during retired life. In other words, given the circulation that we end up with, we take the remaining value of all existent property, we subtract the circulation from it, and we distribute that to the accounts of the people, including unemployed people and whatnot, as they would have saved on their lives under mathematically perfected economy. And to boot, this is not a complete restoration of damages because we've been denied of an ability to produce to our capacities over this whole while as well. So this is rather minimal in truth. Restoration of damages. Now, if the people want to go after the banking system for further issues, however they decide, that's your business. But I'm resolving things here in this prescription as best as I can, according to the principles that we have to abide by if we're going to establish a initial sustainable state. So, D. Means of accommodating a segregated persistence in unearned gain, if any. As unearned gain denies an otherwise free enterprise of its principal object of reward, commensurable with production, and as unearned gain therefore is mutually exclusive to the indispensable objects of true free enterprise, a mutually assented divorce of ways shall exist, in which neither the commerce nor currency of unearned gain shall interact with any otherwise free and just enterprise, but at most by perpetual commensurable devaluation of the commerce and currency of unearned gain, so effective as to strip unearned gain from any possibility of cost to truly free and just enterprise. E. Lawful resolution of purported foreign debt. Foreign debt, bound to no more than uniform, achievable, practiced principles of any and every potential respondent, shall either be forgiven, shall be resolved by issuance of like irredeemable instruments of artificial indebtedness, shall be paid strictly from the assets of assenting parties, if any, or shall be ostensible should the ostensible debtors have incurred such obligations by explicit agreement, and should the debt holder have actually given up the subject property to the respective ostensible obligor, then the respective obligations shall be refinanced under mathematically perfected economy in the resultant currency of the country, and to the like extent of contribution to facts of production, if and only if the country practices mathematically perfected economy respective to actual contribution to the pool of wealth. Lawful resolution of purported debts to the former obfuscators and exploiters of our promissory obligations. Thus the sum of falsified indebtedness to obfuscators of our promissory obligations are to be resolved by any combination of an inherent determination that indeed no such actual debts can have existed to a purported banking system which in fact gives up no lawful consideration in its mere falsifications of the role of creating money, and or honoring both the collective or individual issuance by purported debtors of just such irredeemable promises to pay as full and equally valid resolution of every iota of falsified indebtedness, in which every case it shall be treason from the moment of a petitioner's signature to this mandate, for pretended financial entities, or for any acting agent thereof, to refuse said manner of valid full resolution from any petitioner hereby claiming such equally valid authority, as likewise could only be misconstrued in convening such an unwarrantable power upon a purported banking or financial system, the very only possible intents of which were to impose all of the present crimes upon us, or certainly the perpetrators would already have ceased of their own volition. Further contest of this necessarily equilateral power of private citizens to issue irredeemable promises to pay in return for irredeemable promises to pay, if any such contest shall ensue, shall be settled only in legitimate courts, representing the common interests of the people, wherein, therefore, no private entity shall prevail in purported rights, authorities, or privileges not granted to any and every other, and in which sole legitimate exercise, therefore, any purported court or other body of authority failing to uphold this principle shall be guilty of treason, unless it can fully, legitimately, and conclusively establish that obligors receive from the purported banking or financial system the equal lawful consideration which they cannot have received in this purposed obfuscation of money, whatever the ultimate decision of national penalties. Every signatory of this mandate, therefore, is hereby empowered under the natural equilateral rights of sovereign people, and therefore by every irrefutable and even virtually unchallenged argument herein, to immediately seize all payment likewise of taxations, which even to the least extent may be non-compliant with any stricture of this act, in that such taxations may involve even the least iota of unjust cost imposed by the present purposed obfuscation of our currency. In every which case, therefore, any ostensible authority attempting to enforce such taxations shall be guilty of treason, whatever the ultimate decision of national penalties. And according to all of which, any purported court or other body of authority failing to enforce this principle, and or therefore to protect the people from every such unjust cost, shall be guilty of treason, whatever the ultimate decision of national penalties. G. Inherent criminality of unrecoverable consequences. Being as persistence in any endangerment which subjects ourselves or our progeny to unrecoverable consequences cannot be tolerated, any exercise which cannot be fully responsible, or which is not fully responsible for reasonably probable consequences of its exercises, shall be a severe criminal transgression of this act. Of course, this principle applies to many other breaches of power or justifiable practice even in our private lives. Section 8. Necessary eradication of disinformation, criminality of disinformation. It shall be a severe criminal transgression of this act for government to disinform the people of potential or pretended success or failure of any existent or advocated government program or act, such as, for instance, downwardly falsifying present unemployment data, to withhold vital information from the public, or to know of such disinformation without making reasonably immediate and practical attempts to expose evident government crimes, disinformation, or withholding of vital information, in every case of which the judicial